All right. Welcome back. Good to see you guys again. Today we're starting with the real deal, so to speak. It doesn't get much realer than Hobbes, in many ways. Pretty proud of that one. That went well. So, I mean, in part because it's kind of grim. In part because it's really kind of the starting point of modern political philosophy. But kind of, you can forget the kind of. This is the starting point of modern political philosophy. It's even also the starting point of modern political science. When we talked about the analytical method last week, we talked about how philosophers that use this method, but also scientists that use this method, when we analyze things, we try to unpack complex phenomena, processes, facts into their component parts and to understand it as a result of those. And Hobbes is really the first one who started doing this with social phenomena, with things that happen in society. Why are societies stable? Why are they unstable? Why do lawful societies subsist when they do? When does anarchy break out? When it does? There's a lot of explanations that are kind of intuitively attractive that don't do much explaining. You might think, for example, I always use the following example. You get these sort of pundits who talk about the violence that's going on in the Middle East. And they say, well, why is there so much violence in the Middle East and not over here? Well, there's something violent in Islam, they'll say. Well, maybe that's true, maybe that's false, but it's not an explanation, right, of the violence. Because what you're saying is, well, people there are violent. Why? Well, because there's something in them that's violent. Well, yeah, thank you. So where is that coming from, right? Like, I want to know, I knew they were violent. That's what I asked in the first place, right? But you'll hear this stuff bandied around on TV all the time as if it's analysis. But it's not analysis, right? We're not explaining anything. We're not gaining any understanding. We're just kicking the can down the road from the situation to the culture or something, right? And so a lot of political philosophy had this type of form actually up to Hobbes in a much more subtle way. If you read Aquinas, for example, and Aquinas goes all the way back to Aristotle, you'll see that for a society to be a good society, people have to take the common good to be incorporate the common good, pursue the good, and do that sort of rationally. And Hobbes is really the first one who says that's not much of an explanation, because we want to know why, how come that societies further the common good, and then if you say, well, it's because the people further or pursue the common good, you're not really explaining to me how come sometimes it happens and sometimes it don't. Right? And so Hobbes' analysis of the state of nature and his analysis of why the government or why a state, why the sovereign might actually, Leviathan, right, might actually end the situation of the state of nature. That's analysis. You get, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, you're getting a real story, a real account here. And so it's pretty spectacular in that way. It's real insight of, I've read it dozens of times, and every time I read it, I was preparing my lecture note, and I was like, geez, this guy's a genius. So, yeah, it's really this is, I hope you enjoy it, because it's, yeah, it's really insightful. All right, so what we're going to do, here's a quick overview of the next few lectures. Two things I should have said in the beginning, I haven't. One, sorry that we've gone back to white. I know you like the darker better, but on the video, the darker is completely unreadable. And so I asked the people who do the stuff online, they say, well, keep it white, so I'm going to keep it white. Also saves a lot of ink if you print off these slides. Right. Makes a difference. Anyway, so that's one. So with apologies, but it's pretty, you can edit these slides all you want. If you want to change the background, just change, there's a button there. Two, so if you look at the syllabus, we've got about 3 lectures reserved for Hobbes. That was supposed to be 2, it's now 3. It might become 4. I'm going to try my darndest to keep it within 3. There's just a lot there that needs careful unpacking to really, that's the thing with analysis, right? Like you unpack so that you kind of, it sprawls, right? More stuff keeps appearing. And you need to understand it all in order to get the end product fully seen. Anyway, so I'm going to try and keep it 3. If it moves to 4, I'll let you know as soon as possible. You guys, you're going to have to suffer with me. This might happen several times throughout term. You're my guinea pigs, right? This is the first time I'm doing this course in this form, and so we'll see. I promise that whatever way I change it, it won't be, you won't have a moment where suddenly within a week or something you have to read like 19 different pieces just to cram it all in. If I can't get to the next thing, things will disappear and we'll just spread out term more. So any changes will be in some ways to your benefit. I can promise you that. All right, so what's the project, right? Like what are we doing here? So Hobbes tries to justify the state, right? That's ultimately the goal. He's trying to tell you that, hey, actually you should obey the state, and you should not complain about the state, you should not resist the state. And why is that? Well, he gives a really two-part answer. One is, it's rational to accept the state. So it's in everyone's self-interest. There's a particular kind of rationality he's using, sometimes called instrumental rationality. So that's a very minimal conception of rationality, right? Sometimes people say, well, it's rational to live. So Aquinas will say this. Aristotle would say these things, or Aristotelians. It's rational to live in accordance with reason, and then reason turns out to be this really thick, interesting, deep concept about the good life and so on. Right? Where in Aquinas' case, the highest form of reason is contemplating God, for example. Because that's the best, that's to contemplate the most purest form of good, and so on. That's sort of where it tends towards naturally. Anyway, Hobbes is not doing any of that, right? He's saying, no, I'm just going to say that's all really controversial stuff. Some people accept it, some people don't. I'm going to go with something much more minimal, which is in your self-interest. And really, self-interest is going to turn out like, does it kill you or not? That's going to be the bottom line. And he says, we can all agree that it's better to stay alive than to get killed, right? Right, okay. And then that's, so he thinks it's rational to accept the state because it's your best bet at not getting killed. That's really the bottom line. So don't, shut up. It's in your interest. That's the first answer, right? The first part of the answer. The other part of the answer is you have no grounds for a moral objection to live under the state because really morality is derived from the law. So if you think, hey, wait a minute, the state is treating me unjustly, that's a mistake, says Hobbes, because justice is whatever the state tells you. And so it's circular, right? You can't object against the state treating you unjustly if what justice is derives from the state in the first place. So that, of course, both are controversial. The second one is really controversial, right? Yesterday was MLK Day, right? So that's all about protesting unjust laws. Right? Wrong. Like, you don't get it. King, you didn't get it, right? If Hobbes is right, then it was a mistake there. If Hobbes is right, actually, we should be really kind of being sort of purposefully iconoclastic here. You get where I'm going with this. But if Hobbes was right, you really should be scared of people like Martin Luther King, because what Hobbes is what Hobbes' main worry is, if we start messing around with the law, we start resisting it, we start second guessing it, we start protesting it, there is a chance that the whole thing will come undone. Bless you. And when the whole thing comes undone, you might all get killed. Right? And so that's really his worry. Historically, by the way, for Hobbes, this was a really live issue, right? Like Hobbes saw the English Civil War, so he actually saw different people in society who had different views about what was right and wrong, Catholics and Protestants in this case, fight to the death, right, over who was right and who was wrong and who was going to be in charge. And so that's really animating the work. He's saying, like, okay, we can't have that anymore. We can't have different people who have different views about what's right and wrong, as we always all of us have, right? When people disagree, we can't have this disagreement spiral out of control. All right. That's all by means of introduction. So far, so good? One of the things about Hobbes, by the way, like if you're already sort of feeling like you're digging your heels in, like lots of people have that feeling that there's something going wrong here. But one of the reasons why it is so spectacular as a piece of philosophy is it's really hard to wiggle your way out of the argument. So he takes assumptions that are very straightforward and simple, and there are not that many of them. And then once you have them in place, the whole thing rolls out, right? And like suddenly you have this crazy conclusion, and you're like, wait, what happened? And then yeah, so. If you're going to figure out that something happened and you can wiggle your way out of one of the what seem to be pretty few and pretty straightforward assumptions, you're learning something. Right? You're learning that things that originally seemed true may not be true after all. Or maybe we should challenge some of our conclusions or beliefs. Who knows? Right? All right. That's the point, right? So if the state is morally unobjectionable and a good deal, then it's justified. That's just it's a standard of what we could take, what it means to justify something. Right? Show that it's a good deal and show that there is no moral objection. Then we have a justification. All right. So here's the 3 steps that he's going to take. And I'm hoping that we can do this in 3 classes. That's what we'll see. So first is he has to show that the state of nature being there is no government, right? State of nature will be actually horrible, right? And why? That's the analysis part, the why. So first show your alternative to the state is terrible. And the second is this terrible and non-moral condition can actually be ended by the state and only by the state, right? So there's only one alternative to this non-state condition. And that alternative ends the horror. Right? He has to show that too. And then third, he has to show that there is no real moral objection because justice is due to the state. So we'll get there. So today, we're going to look at just why are things so bad in the state of nature. The argument for why the state of nature is so bad and so violent is probably the most influential argument in the history of political philosophy. If you've read it, and if you've read Hampton, you'll have seen that her discuss it in the terms of the prisoner's dilemma. We'll get to that, but that sort of kicked off a whole field of formal theory in economics, game theory, rational choice theory. Tries to elaborate on that. Sorry? Yeah, this one it's not there yet, but I'll put it on as soon as we're done. Yeah. Yeah, so the argument has been really influential there. It's been influential in basic arguments for things like the argument for property rights that we'll see Hume, for example, give later on. We'll see it it's the part of the standard analyses in environmental studies for like why pollution happens or why overfishing of the high seas, for example. These are all the same. You see the same tool you'll see come back and back again. Before I go at it, let me ask you a question. One of the reading questions I put on was, if you've read Hobbes, you'll see he says the state of nature is, it's always 6. No one can ever forget all 6. Everyone always remembers the last 3. Nasty, brutish, and short. Right? Like, crappy, violent. There's no place for industry. There's no place for trade, and so on. Right? Why? Why is it so crappy? Can anyone try and give an answer? Yeah, don't we?
Well, you said there's no central power, there's no laws, and then you maybe jump that because there's no laws, there's no injustices. So you seem to think that just because there's no law set in place that people are going to behave morally, and that it's going to be in people's best interest to actually behave that way.
What was the last part?
Well, it's in their best interest to behave in a nasty, brutish kind of way because there are no laws, there's no injustices. So like, if you follow this so-called like moral law that's out there, then you're actually like kind of being a sucker, and like well, everybody else is gonna like go ahead and follow this like apparent moral law, and so there's some taking advantage of it, you're losing out on in the state of nature.
Yeah, we'll see next time. It's not like it's even worse than being. You are a sucker if you are the first one like if you follow the right and wrong thing to do in the state of nature, if you be all trustworthy and stuff, you know. He actually thinks it's wrong to be trustworthy, and like you don't, like you really ought not. It's not that you're sort of being overly innocent, insanely, and ready to be taken advantage of. It's like because you're ready to be taken advantage of, you really must not do it. So yeah, so there is no law, there is no state, there is no justice and injustice, and so you can't really afford to be doing anything productive, right? You can't really afford to build things, to plan things, to invest, to save, all these things you can't really afford. That's kind of the symptom of the problem, right? Like, so why can't we afford to do these things? Like, why is the absence of the state going to be so worrying?
I would say, and I agree with what Dominic said, I would say because he believes that men are not social animals in the way that Locke sees men. He sees men as individualistic and self-interested. And the only way that they can be social animals is when they're coerced by the mechanisms of the state.
Yeah, good. So he thinks I'm not naturally social in the way that Locke thinks. By social, I guess you mean like sort of living together peacefully.
Yes, cooperation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right, and it's not right. So it's right in sort of in the outside world, if you will, right? There's a passage, chapter 13 or 14, I forget. Anyway, where he talks about, he makes a distinction between inforo interno and inforo externo, which really seems to be sort of like unconscious in your outward actions. And he says, you know, well, in the inforo interno, in your conscience, you really should always be. There are no exceptions to the rule that you should be trustworthy, seek peace, and so on. It's just in your actions, not always. It's just like not always is the phrase. He thinks there's basically, like being social, as you put it, right? That's not an unconditional requirement, right? If you were doing it unconditionally, you'd be a sucker, like Dominic said, right? Because you'd be. It's like inviting everyone into your house all the time, right? Whichever way they look, however they look, whatever crazed look they might have in their eyes, if they're wielding guns and knives and stuff, you still come over for dinner, right? It's not smart, right? Like you're going to get killed that way. And Hobbes thinks you know that, right? And so you should be a little cautious. And the caution is actually the thing that causes all the trouble. So the other reading question I had was about anticipation. He says like he thinks part of the violence is due to anticipation. And I asked you what are we anticipating when we attack? Like so, he said in the state of nature, people will attack each other out of anticipation. Does anyone remember? Like, have an idea what? We'll get to that if you don't. But. Was it Michaela? Yeah.
Is it kind of like you attack because you want to attack first before because you're afraid that they're going to attack you, but then you attack them, they're going to attack you back, so it's kind of like
Right, exactly. Yeah, so you anticipate that the other one might attack you first. And so then the best defense is offense in a way, right? And so really the whole point of him that he's trying to make is saying, well, this caution about being sociable, it's really a form of self-defense, right? It's just making sure that you don't get killed when you turn your back on others. And in a state of nature, when there is no government, there are no laws, he thinks you can't afford to turn your back on anyone. Because you know as soon as you turn your back, they might stick a knife in there, or hit you over the head with a club, or just start strangling, whatever horrible shit these assholes are up to, right? You don't know. Well, you don't know who you're dealing with, so you can't afford to turn your back on them, and you attack them first. And it's really just a form of self-defense, he thinks. So, and that's what's giving us the trouble, right? So you might want to be a sociable person, and he thinks actually it's reasonable, perfectly rational to be a sociable person, but you can't be a sociable person to the point of death, risking your own death. And then, so in our society, we feel very safe. So, a stranger comes into a house, it looks like they're lost. Maybe you say, come in, we'll, have a glass of water, we'll call AAA or something, whatever, right? You do these things because we trust each other. But he says, that's how in our society, you're assuming that there's this type of protection out there that we have here with police and prisons and courts and stuff, so that if they mess you over, there will be consequences. But you take that away, he says, if there are no consequences for them to screw you over, then you don't know who you're inviting. Right? And if you don't know who you're inviting, then you shouldn't invite them. He says, really what you should be doing is you should take them out before they can take you out. And so that's, the whole thing starts from there. Right? John, you have your hand up?
Yes, I was just going to say that the optimal situation is if both sides are peaceful. And the two worst situations is if one side assumes the other side is going to be peaceful, then someone just runs through them and attacks them under the Hobbesian scenario.
Yeah.
Like if you prepare yourself for peace and then someone attacks you, then you're completely done away with. And the other side does the same thing, then they're completely done away with. Although both sides attacking one another will be a negative scenario, it's still the best scenario next to both sides being peaceful. So that's why it says you should attack. It's the second best option.
Right. Yeah, so you know that the worst thing to do is that the other takes you out first. And so in anticipation of, I don't want that, right, you attack first. But of course, they think the same way, right? And that's how everyone starts. That's why it's a war of all against all, he says. Everyone attacks each other because everyone knows they can't turn their back on each other. Right? We playing games now? All right, we're going to get through this in some more, with some more calm and precision. So, really, there's three assumptions that need to be put in place here. There's a couple more later, but these are the most important ones for now. So first is, Hobbes says, in a state of nature, we're all about roughly equal strength and smarts. So physically and mentally, we're about equally strong. Of course, not exactly equally strong, right? Some people are old, some people are young, some people are sick, some people are healthy. Some people are just stronger, bigger. Some people are smarter, more cunning. Right? He actually thinks being really smart, might not be the best thing because you'll be reasoning and thinking about, oh, what will be the way, and then the other guy is taking you out first. Anyway, the point is, no one is strong enough to sort of naturally subdue everyone else. Right? No one is strong enough to be. No one is so strong, naturally speaking, that they can always. That everyone else is so afraid of them that whatever they say, if you mess with me, it'll be really bad for you. You can't beat me. Now, if you had that, right, if there was someone who you couldn't beat, and this person wouldn't have to be afraid of you, and so that person wouldn't have to attack out of anticipation. If Superman lived among us, right, Superman doesn't have to start attacking people because he can't be hurt. I can see if you're trustworthy or not. I can afford to wait and see what kind of person you are. But you and me, right, non-Superman, for us, there's trouble. You might be super strong, right? You might be 7 foot tall, like the Rock type, right? You can pretty much take out anyone, but you still have to sleep. So you can keep it up for maybe 48 hours, and then at some point you're going to have to sleep, and then scrawny 6'2" me, there I am, right? Okay. Okay. So even the Rock won't be able to. So Dwayne Johnson, I should say. Anyway, so that's one, right? So there's no one is naturally capable of keeping everyone, like not having to fear with anyone, and therefore forcing their will on everyone else. So second, this just by definition, there is no higher power that could do this, right? So no one of us can be in charge naturally, and then there is no higher power. You might think God is there, of course, but God is not exactly there at every moment in your life to actually physically force your hand, right? Stop you from stabbing me. So maybe in the end of days, God will, the reckoning will be there, but when I'm trying to stay alive, I'm not worrying about the end of days. I'm worrying about this day being the end, right? So that's just by definition. And here's the third. There's just this thought about the instrumental form of rationality I was talking about. So ultimately, we care mostly about ourselves. So he thinks that we're in some sense egoists, all of us. Now, egoist doesn't have to mean that we're all jerks. Right? Not that we only think of sort of money and fame and stuff, but he just says, like, ultimately, when you have to choose, when it comes down to a choice between me and you, I'll choose me. I want to see. Was it Trevor? Is that right? No. Savoy. Jeez, no, that's not even close. Savoy. Sorry about that.
Do you think he would say that survival outweighs self-gratitude?
Survival outweighs what?
Self-gratitude. Like, if you say, like, he believes that we care more about ourselves. If it came down to, like, survival versus, like, you can just, like, have all of this for yourself.
You could have all of what for yourself?
I guess, like, whatever that society.
Like all the money or something? Or like, can you give an example? Like,
I mean, like, so for me personally, like, I agree with number one. Kind of. I definitely agree with number two. I agree. I think number one, to an extent, I just feel like, in terms of power, like the political system being implemented, like, once you, like, expose humans to power, that's when everything becomes, like, detrimental. I think if you can just provide the basic, like, needs for survival and everyone is a part of that, then there becomes no need for competition or, I guess, like
yeah.
Like, then you don't have to, like, that's why I guess the self-gratitude or, like, caring more about yourself, like, if you can stay alive at the means of, like, not having everything for yourself, then why have to, like, hoard or whatever?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. So, is your thought that if basic survival and some sort of comfort is taken care of, then the egoism thing starts to diminish in its importance? Like, we don't really care as much about the next thing anymore as long as we have the base covered.
Yes, or even, I mean, like, you can still advance, like, your society or whatever, but there's
Right.
no, like, like, need factor.
Right, good. Yeah, so you're raising a good point here. So Hobbes is making a claim about human psychology here, right? But how do we work as people? And so there's ways to challenge it, right? If he's saying, well, you're really selfish, like all of us really at heart, psychologically, we're selfish, we're egoistic. You might say, well, only up to a point, right? And then after that, you start caring more about how society does or how people around you do and so on. Maybe. But notice that for Hobbes, he really doesn't need the full-fledged egoism, right? Really what he needs is like egoism about your own survival versus someone else. Right? All that matters is that if one of us is going to die, right, I'm going to try to make it be you, right? And you're going to try to make it be me. Right? And as long as we have that, he thinks then the whole state of nature problem arises. So, but it's a great point because as it's stated in the text, he's making a stronger assumption than he really needs. Right? So modern Hobbesians, people who follow him, like philosophers now who write things like Hobbes, who try to develop the theory in various ways, they usually go back to something like disaster avoidance, like the things that, like, think of like basic insurance, like what do you want from your health insurance? It's nice if they, pick up your doctor's bill for your physical once a year. You really want is like if you go into surgery and it costs like $70,000, you want them to pick up that tab, right? So avoiding the worst possible outcome, and that's this thing, right? So like ultimately the worst is you get killed. And so what you care about most is that you don't get killed. But yeah. Michaela, yeah. I ignored you for a second.
I don't know if it's super relevant now, but yeah, I would disagree just a little bit, just because I feel that even if all of the needs were made and everyone, had what they needed to be fairly comfortable, I still feel that people in general would want to make, like, kind of what Hobbes is saying, like, we care about ourselves, and so,
Right.
we want to be, like, in that scenario, he's saying we want to stay alive, but I feel like even if everything was satisfied, people would still care about themselves more and want to make themselves the best, which then involves making someone else lower, which I feel that even if everything was satisfied, there would still be the danger,
Mm-hmm.
if you were with this.
Right. Yeah, it could be that even if you had your bases covered, there would still be this competition. Hobbes seems to think so because he writes things about like how we're very vain, right? Like we like glory and we like praise, and so we like being above others. And so yeah, I'm sure he would agree with you. My point was just that even if you think all that is too much, there is a more modest position that he could fall back to that still creates all the trouble that he's ultimately worried about. Notice also that, like, so people, modern followers of Hobbes, interpret the egoism this way. Egoism doesn't necessarily have to mean I want everything in my, like all the money in my pocket and none in yours and none in anyone else's, right? So what it usually people think is like I have a set of preferences, things that I care about, and the egoist says ultimately if I have to choose between my preferences being satisfied and yours, when both can be satisfied, I'm going to choose mine over yours. And that could be things like I care about my child doing well, right? So that's not egoistic in the sense of it's me that I want good things for him, not for me. But it's still egoistic in the sense that these are my cares, my values. And when it's between my child and yours, we're still going to fight because I'm going to try and make it be my child who gets the money and you're going to try to make it your child who make it, right? And so that's all ultimately he's trying to say. Like when a push comes to shove, I'm going to try and get what I think matters most, and you're going to try to get what you think it matters most. And in the limiting case, that's really clear because it's life or death, right? And then we have this natural instinct to just find them for ourselves. Will, you had your hand up a while back, and I forgot.
Oh yeah, no, that's cool. I got what he was saying. I was just gonna like try and rephrase it, but
it's Will, right?
Yeah. Will.
Yeah. Sorry, this Savoy thing got me. I'm sure not. Sorry. Go on.
No, that was it. I was just saying I got what he was saying, so I was just going to rephrase it, but that all got sorted out a bit back. So.
Okay, good. Thanks. I'll come to you earlier next time. Maybe save me time. So why is the state of nature a state of war of all against all? Right? If the three things are true, then the world becomes zero-sum in the sense that my gain comes at your loss and vice versa. Right? This is bad news. We'll see this later, why that is the case. But here are some quotes. So if any two men desire the same thing, which nevertheless they cannot both enjoy, they become enemies. Right? So they cannot both enjoy the same thing in the state of nature. Here's a banana tree, right? I'm hungry, you're hungry. If I take some bananas, that's less bananas for you, right? So I'm a threat because I'm trying to take the food that you want and need. And you're a threat because you're trying to take the food that I want and need. Right? And so we become enemies, he says. And in the way to their end, which is primarily or principally their own conservation and sometimes their delectation, only endeavor to destroy and subdue one another. He says once that happens, once we become enemies, we'll try to destroy each other, subdue each other. So why would people be this aggressive? And I say why exactly? Because we want analysis, right? So here's the anticipation story that we talked about. Here are the quotes. So fear of oppression disposes a man to anticipate, to seek aid by society, for there is no other way by which a man can secure his life and liberty. Okay, from this difference of one another, there is no way for any man to secure himself so reasonable as by anticipation, that is by force. Or to master the persons of all men he can, so long till he see no other power great enough to endanger him. And this is no more than his own conservation required, and is generally allowed. So this is just self-defense, he's saying, right? This anticipation stuff. So here's the stuff about the confident and the smart and the confident ones against the the more doubtful. So men that distrust their own subtlety, so people who aren't like as confident that they're really smart and cocky, are in tumult and sedition, better disposed for victory than they that suppose themselves wise and crafty. For those that love consult the other, fearing to be circumvented, to strike first. So the first one, the smart ones are talking and lecturing about how important it is to, and then the other ones are just taking you out. So, anyway. So these are just some quotes where you see this point about anticipation and how anticipation makes you strike first. So you must continually defend yourself, and the best way to do this is to attack others preemptively. Get yours in first. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast? All right. So let's get to the prisoner's dilemma thing that Hampton is talking about, and we'll break it down in a couple of steps. So, a simple example, right? Imagine two people, two strangers come across each other in a state of nature. They don't know each other, right? All they know is it's person A and person B, you and me, and that's it, right? There's no police, there's no prison, there is no judges, there's no, right? There's no government, it's just you and me. So, walking, right? There he is, right? So two people are here, right? So this, what can happen? Let's say that we just break it up into either each of them has two possibilities, two possible actions. There's the other. I can either attack, right? Or I cannot attack. You just keep on going. Of course, the other one, right? I can either attack or not attack, right? So two people, two options, 4 possible outcomes, right? So if one is both attack, one is you attack, they do not. 3 is they attack and you do not. And the 4th is neither attacks. You just keep both be on your merry way. If you had to rank these, just like from best to worst, you being you, right? Which is the best possible outcome, you think? Neither attacks? Why? Sorry? Right, yeah, so that guarantees that you stay alive, but also nobody else? Right, so that's the risk of being attacked sneakily when you think it's over and neither is attacked, and it might turn. So neither attacks might turn into they attack and you do not. Dominic?
Well, wouldn't it be you attack and they don't, because then you can at least get rid of that threat, supposed threat of that person, and then also by getting rid of that threat, you can also take their stuff. So like, actually for like me, it's better that I attack and you don't, rather than both of us just like not attack.
Right, good. Yes, so it is you attack and they do not. Keep in mind, right? So you're showing you're a nice and good person, right? Like you care about the other person. But remember, in the state of nature, there may not really be, there's no law and so on. And so we'll see later, but keep it in mind for now, Hobbes thinks there is no morality here, right? So if you think that's the wrong thing to do, he's going to try and tell you that doesn't really apply. First you, and I'll come. What's your name, by the way?
Malik.
Malik? Okay.
So in this situation, does like you attacking first guarantee that you're going to win? Because if not, then just because you attack first doesn't mean you're going to win. So there's still that chance that either way you die.
Right.
So that I think just the best possible outcome is that nobody attacks. That way everybody stays alive.
Right.
Because just because you think if you attack first that you have to get an upper hand, if they just are quicker than you and they see you attack, they see you coming at them, they can move out of the way and then slap you in the back of the head and you guys.
Right. Yeah. So great points. Two things that you were saying. One was, it might be best for all involved if nobody attacks, right? And the second was, well, really it was the first, but anyway. The second point was, you might not know that you can take them out, right? So attacking might not be rational. Now, first, right, you're right, of course, that for all involved, it's way better if nobody attacks. We don't want the state of nature to be as crappy as it is, right? It just turns into crap. And the problem is, really, this is the brilliance of Hobbes. Hobbes is showing you how it's possible that the situation can be bad for everybody, not because the people are bad, right? Not because the people don't care about good stuff, no, precisely because they care about good stuff. It's because every individual person is rationally trying to get the best thing, we all end up with something crappy. And so that's totally counterintuitive, right? So that's the difference. Aquinas says what makes a good society is everyone trying to be a good person. No, says Hobbes. Right? Sometimes if we just try to do the right thing, we try to get what's better over what's worse, things end up really being really, really crappy. So Nobody wants this war of all against all, but nobody also wants to die. And so it turns out that what's individually rational is collectively irrational. And that's the truth. And that's real deep insight, right? If that doesn't excite you, then you might be in the wrong course. Anyway, that's okay. So that's one, right? The second thing you said about, well, it might not be rational to attack because you might lose. Well, think it through, right? So what are my options? My options are attack or not attack, right? Now, of course, if I attack, I might lose because he's much stronger. But then if I don't attack and he's much stronger, he might want my stuff, right? So if I wait and let him come at me first, if he's much stronger, then I'm definitely dead, right? So if he's much stronger, that's actually all the more reason I should get in first, because maybe he doesn't see me coming, or right? Or maybe I can hurt him with it, because I'll get in the first punch. Maybe I can just break his arm or something, and I'll have a chance, right? So if he's that much stronger, I'm probably screwed, right? If I'm probably screwed, give myself a chance to survive. Right? And that's the reasoning that Hobbes is pointing to. So if you really just think this is a state of nature where there is no power to keep the other one back, all it takes, right, is a slight look or something, right? And you know, like, gotta get going now. And it's sort of like, so you stop. Why do you stop? Because you're looking like, uh-oh, right? Can I trust this person? And any moment where I doubt whether I should attack or not, it might be too late. And so that's his thinking, right? And that's going to make me. So I do that once or twice, right? And then the third time, if I'm lucky enough to live to the third time, I've learned my lesson, right? I'm going to just go, like, I'm going to jump you before you have time to look at me. And so everybody is doing this all the time. Will?
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess noting that for a hypothetical situation, there's a certain amount of simplicity that has to go with it, or else it just doesn't work. You can just overanalyze and make it so complicated that it just doesn't work anymore. So noting that, but still just to make it a little bit more complex, to address that, I think that it's being overly simplistic in saying that, well, the win would be if they're like super weak, you attack first, you're not hurt or anything, and you get all their stuff. But I think that's overly simplistic in that most people don't want to kill other people in general, not just because of laws, but like that people feel guilty. I think that if someone was to say, well, I definitely wouldn't attack, I think that it'd be pretty likely that someone else would say, well, it's easy for you to say that now, but when you're in the situation, you might.
Right.
I would say the opposite of that by saying that, well, you might think that you would attack because that's what seems safest for you, but most people don't want to kill other people. So I think that it might be easy to make it very simple in your mind and say, the best thing for me is to kill the student, take his stuff, because what do I want? I want stuff. But people also want to not kill people and feel guilty for that, you know?
Yeah, so Hobbes says, you know, in this situation, people will attack each other, and you're saying, actually, I don't think they will.
Yeah.
And you're right? So people have, like, psychologists study this stuff, mostly, well, depends the situation you put him in. If you put him in this type of situation, it turns out that most people, but not all, do, like, it's not a life or death situation. They usually do things like, when there's money to be had, like $10 or something, and you can grab it all, or you can make it the case that the other one gets his share too, or something. More people than not grab it all, so they do cheat. Now, a lot here depends, right? It depends if you know that you're going to, so Hampton talks about this, for example. If you know that you're only going to see them once, people cheat a lot more than if they know you're going to see this person again. If they can talk to each other, turns out people become much more trustworthy. And so, right, so. But then again, if the stakes go up, the money goes up, people start cheating much quicker than if the stakes are low. So you're right. In our society, lots of people wouldn't do this, because in our society we come across each other, we deal with each other repeatedly, right? We can talk, we can try and build up trust and so on. And thank God, right? Because we end up in these situations all the time, right?
But doesn't that mean that, so again, assuming that everything goes perfectly and you're not hurt, and you attack first, and you kill them and stuff, even if more people than not would do that, again, that does not necessarily mean that it's a win for you, because then you're alive and you might feel guilty about that.
Right.
And the amount of unpleasantness or pain or whatever that you get from that might be greater than getting beat up and having your stuff taken.
Yeah, so yeah, right. So you might have to live down the guilt. Yeah. Michaela, I'll get to Michaela, then I'll come to you.
Yeah, like I see that. But then I also wonder if the reason that we, like, I think there's kind of the two possibilities of the innate morality, kind of like, if we're innate to feel guilty, if we kill someone, or if the guilt comes from what the state, like the consequences that are at stake. So if there were no consequences, would we still have that guilt?
Right.
So I think it's kind of like the idea of the two possibilities of whether it's innate or whether it's just kind of consequences.
So it's the idea that you might be taught to feel guilty about these things because we live under these rules, but in a state of nature, these rules wouldn't exist, and so there wouldn't be this pressure upon you, and you might not feel as guilty anymore.
Unless like the nature of state came after the wonderful environment, because then
Right.
if people had already like, I feel like that's something that's super deeply ingrained. Whether,
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, Hobbes has a couple of things to say about this. I have a later slide and I'll have a quote. But what he says is most people's beliefs about right and wrongs, it's maybe a little bit like you. So he says that they follow custom. So it's sort of like tradition and the habit that we just do every day. And he says, well, it turns out the way that we read or interpret custom and the things that we sort of pick on as the right and the wrong things, they tend to be pretty sensitive to what's in our interest. So we get very angry and we think it's very, very wrong when it's bad for us. And then when it's good for us, we think, yeah, okay, well, generally it'd be wrong, but maybe this is an exception, or maybe it's not that bad to break it sometimes. And so, you know, and he says this is one of the reasons why people dispute and fight and disagree over morality so much, is because our interest, like what's good for us, affects what we think is right. That is pretty psychologically insightful by Hobbes, by the way. There's a lot of psychology that's been done over the last decades by cognitive biases and stuff, and so there's self-serving biases are all over the place. So it might not be as blatant as I get to kill whoever I want, but we do read the rules of morality with a self-serving, through a self-serving lens. And so now, right, in a state of nature, you come up to these persons and you might think, well, if it really is you or me, I do get to defend myself, and so you might be able to sort of justify, like when you try to go to bed at night, you might be able to justify it. You say, well, gosh, I feel really guilty, but what am I going to do, right? And so people tell themselves stories like this, right?
That's all I was
Yeah.
going to say, is that like it's like in the end it's like, would you rather be guilty feeling or dead? And I think
Right.
anyone would pick guilty, you know, it's like
Right.
I'd rather feel like a monster all day than be dead.
Right. Yeah, so well, two more things about this quickly. One is Hobbes might say two more things, right, even if you're right. One is, okay, these people who feel guilty, you know what's going to happen to them? They're going to disappear real quick. Right? They're going to get killed. So just by selection, those people aren't left anymore. So state of nature, you have these people. Fast forward 3 months, you don't have these people. And then you just have his state of nature left. So that's one thing you could say. Second, a little more seriously, what he's trying to show, right, is he's trying to show that, remember the game that we're playing, right? He's trying to justify this state. He's trying to show you that this is a rational bargain for you, right? It's morally unobjectionable, we'll get to that, but he's also trying to say accepting the rule of the state is rational. And by rational, he means in your self-interest. So self-interest here meaning it gives you better chances to survive. So you might be a type of person who wouldn't be an attacker in a state of nature, but that doesn't mean it's not in your interest to accept the state, because the state is protecting it, probably even more, right? Because you'd be one of the sitting ducks in a state of nature, so you'd be extra vulnerable. The point stays the same, right? Like you want to, it's still rational, it's in your self-interest to,
I'm sorry, I don't think you're using it.
okay. It's in your self-interest to accept the government as an alternative to the state of nature. There's a lot, yeah, there's a, Cameron,
Oh,
do you
yeah,
want to say something?
I was just going to say,
It's sort of like people oftentimes put this dilemma as if someone is breaking into your house, and you're face down with them. You have a gun. You're not really sure whether or not they have a gun.
Mm-hmm.
You don't shoot out of a desire to kill. It's not like in the state of nature people are necessarily killing because they have this bloodlust for killing. It's because they rationally decided this is my opportunity for self-defense. Either I take the chance, or I may not live to take any more chances.
Yeah, so that's so it's born out of a desire to defend yourself, and so this is again this is the brilliance of Hobbes, right? He's saying like all he needs. He doesn't need to say that people are these aggressive attackers who just like to kill people. All he needs to show is you just don't want to get killed. I'm a defender. So I won't do anything unless you do something first. But the problem is I can't wait to find out. And so if all I want is to not die, I'll start killing people. And that's his. So that's how you get a violent situation out of non-violent people. I've seen other hands, but I forgot what. You had your hand up a little while back too.
I was just going to say.
What's your name?
Tevin.
Tevin?
Yeah, Tevin. Just for the sake of this situation right here, we're assuming that there is no conscience, right?
Yeah, you
Based
can,
on
right?
In philosophy, we're assuming there is no conscience.
He doesn't need to talk about conscience because he only needs to talk about self-interest. Yeah.
And being that both people are equally strong and smart, the obvious thing for you to do would be to attack first, because I mean, of course, your primary objective is staying alive. So
Right.
you
Yeah.
attack first, and but the better overall outcome for the entire situation would be for neither of you to attack. But if you don't attack, you can't be certain that they wouldn't attack.
Right.
Which is why it's a prisoner's dilemma.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So the better outcome for everybody is that neither attacks,
Yeah.
but we can't get there. Right?
Yeah, you can't
Not
ensure that the other
as
person
rational people, we can't get there.
attacks first.
Right. And so this is the point, right? That was Malik's point too. Like this is actually in everyone's interest. So it would seem that it's sort of rational for both of us to not attack. But Hobbes agrees. He says, yeah, that is rational. That's why the state is rational, because the state is the thing that gets you there. He says, without the state, we can't get there. Not unless both of us are going to be wildly irrational, because we're going to take these completely insane risks that the other one might kill us. Right? And only if we are lucky enough to have two insane people meet each other is no violence happening. Right? Do they both walk away? All the other situations, there's fighting. Oh, and you shouldn't be insane, of course, right? Like you should do the smart thing. That's sorry.
So basically what Hobbes is trying to say is that like the state is a catalyst that gets you to that point of, you know, mutual neutrality or just like mutual like beneficialness.
Yes.
Where nobody dies and everybody like goes on their way. It's just kind of like that middleman sort of thing that just
Exactly. Yeah.
general welfare.
Right. So it's like it's the thing that puts the guarantee in place, the guarantee of safety. And once the guarantee of safety is in place, now we can sort of all relax and start doing, and also we can start doing things like planting crops and maybe like start producing things and so. Like you couldn't do that before because you didn't have time, and even if you did have time, it would make you a target. Right? Savoy?
Randall thought, so, like, according to Hobbes, like, if you were to, like, place a sniper rifle, he would just start, like, picking off people from, like, distance, like, according to, like, his theory.
Yeah, so if he had a sniper rifle, would he just start picking off people at random? Does he have unlimited bullets? Otherwise, you have to make sure that you wait. Like that rifle is real valuable, right? So.
Because it just seems like everything was driven by the fear of being murdered or being.
Yeah. Right. So you probably start picking off the big, strong dudes first, right? Or the ones who are close to you, right? But yeah. You try to, because they're all threats, right? You don't know what they're up to. So, yeah, you have to. That's the best thing you can do for your own self-preservation is to remove potential threats. We did it with wild animals, right? Wolves and bears and stuff. There's a reason why these are threatened with extinction. It's because people said, like farmers said, like, wait a minute, like this might kill my kid. I'm taking it out. So he says, well, you know, what's the problem with a wolf is you can't trust the wolf. Right? Hobbes is saying, state of nature, we're all wolves in that regard. You can't trust each other.
That was my larger question, was like, did he place us at the same level as other animals? Because I was always taught that we were different than animals in the fact that we could reason. And so being able to reason would, I guess,
Right.
eliminate
So-
me coming in contact with a stranger, I was killing you, or you're going to kill me. Like, that's not it.
So yeah, so yes and no, right? So his answer is going to be, we behave like animals, but not because we are like animals. Right? The inside of the theory is he's giving you an analysis of how come people, right? People who can reason, who like to do the right thing, who might have a conscience and stuff, these people start behaving like animals, like wolves. Right? And it's not because they are animals, they're not. Right? He's saying, no, these are people that have the capacity of reason. It's exactly because they have the capacity of reason that they start acting this violently. Right? And that's the twist, right? Like, oh, it's because we're so smart is that we end up in this crappy situation. If only all of us were so stupid to turn our backs to each other, like, then we would automatically end up with a neither attack situation. But we're smart, right? We can think ahead. We can know, like, okay, well, here are my options. I can rank them, and then I know, all right, well, if these are my options, then I better attack first. It's because we're smart that we end up acting like these brutes, right? Will.
But so Hobbes is saying that everyone's number one concern is for themselves, self-interest, right?
Survival at the
Survival,
most. Yeah.
exactly. So if everyone's number one self-interest is survival, then you can trust that everyone's number one interest is self-interest, their survival.
Right.
Well, neither attacks means that everyone survives. So he says that you can't trust people because everyone's wolves, except we're not wolves.
Right.
Because, well, we are wolves in the similarity of
We behave like wolves, but we're not. Yeah.
So if our number one self-interest, what we want out of all those options the most, is to not have to attack anyone and not to be attacked, that's our number one choice, that's our self-interest, then wouldn't we be able to trust that in people?
Right.
That they wouldn't attack because I don't want to attack, because I don't want to attack anyone and I don't want to be attacked. So can't I trust that you, looking out for yourself, you don't want to attack me and you don't want me to attack you?
Yeah, so great question. So I'm going to move to the next slide, but it's be a way to address your question. Just because, so this is the rankings, right? And I know you're challenging this, so I'm going to get to why the rankings are generally thought to be this way. So best option is you attack, they do not, right? Because you're taking out this potential threat. You know you can't turn your back to these people. If you're just trying to keep alive, and you don't know what's what, you don't know if this person might attack you. If you turn your back to them, you get in the first blow. That's the anticipation argument. Right? Second best, neither attacks, right? So that's also great. The third best is both of us attack, right, at the same time. I do stand a chance because we're fighting and I'm here with my fist raised, right? But it's not great because you're fighting back. It was much better when I could take you out, and it was much better when we left each other alone because I wasn't get punched. Right? So that's not very good. 3, and then 4, of course, is the worst. Is when I think I'm going to be this peaceful person, and I walk on, I turn my back, and bang, there you are, right, and I'm dead. That's just certain death. So, all right. So Will's challenging this, saying like, actually, couldn't we just rely on both people have a desire to live, so why don't they just both live, right? Little simplistic maybe, but that's the worry. So here's a way of breaking down why it's rational to attack. So think about it this way. You have a decision, they have a decision. Right? Now you don't get to influence that decision or something, right? You don't get to make that decision for them. You don't get to wait to see what they do first, because that's the dangerous thing, right? So you can decide two things. You can decide to attack or not to attack, which really means, are we going to be above or below this blue line here? Right? So if you attack, you're above. If you don't attack, you're below. And that's the only thing you get to decide. Right? The other person gets to decide whether they attack or not attack, which is going to be that if you attack, then over here, whether we have your outcome number 1 or your outcome number 3, or if you're below, they get to decide whether it's 2 or 4. So all you know is you do one thing, you might get 1 or 3. You do another thing, you might get 2 or 4. If you have to choose between 2 bundles of options, right? like 2 baskets here. There's 4 things that you would like to have in the world. Your favorite thing, your second favorite thing, your third favorite thing, your fourth favorite thing. One basket has your best thing and your third favorite thing. The other thing has your second best thing and your fourth favorite, like your least favorite thing. Which basket do you take? Take 1 and 3, right? So that's the point. You don't have to see what the other one does. It doesn't really matter what the other one does. You're going to choose the basket of 1 and 3, which is really your option is to attack. So no matter what the other person does, your self-interested thing is get there.
But isn't, according to Hobbes' own argument, there's one basket that only contains 3? Because according to him, and it is simplistic because that's his argument, he said that all people's number one, especially when it comes to their own survival, all people's number one thing that they're concerned with is their own survival, which means that everyone will attack all the time.
Right.
So by following this, don't you automatically accept number 3? There's not 2 baskets to choose from with 2 things. There's 1 basket to choose from with 1 thing, according to this philosophy, and that's the third thing. That's out of 4, you're on the lower half. So isn't that irrational? Because according to his own argument, you will always get the third of 4 options, which doesn't sound great.
Yeah, so he is saying it's rational for both of us together to try and leave behind this situation. Because we can both do better than 3. Right? Both of us can do better than 3, because we can both have 2, right? Which is neither of us attacks. If I don't attack and you don't attack, then we end up with 2, and both of us we live happily ever after. Right? And both, so here I get 2, and you get 2, whereas before it was 3 each, right? So we get both from 3 to both 2. This is a totally rational move, right? The problem is we're confusing what your decision is with what the outcome is here, right? So these are the outcomes, but you don't get to select the outcome. Because the outcome depends on both what you do and what the other person does.
But he's saying that you can count on both yourself and the other person to make it the third option, right? Because you're both so selfish that you would both attack.
Yeah, right.
So there's one choice.
Well, there's one outcome that will... You can do 2 things. You can attack or not attack.
But didn't
It's just stupid to not attack, he's saying. So given that people aren't generally not that stupid, they're not so stupid to be suicidal, he thinks they'll end up attacking all the time. But that's a prediction, right? That's not... He also thinks it also thinks what you should do, but he thinks that's what people will do. Now, the outcome stinks, right? So that's why we should leave the state of nature behind, because we can all do better than the state of nature. It's not that I'm going to do better and you're going to not do better when we go from the state of nature to the state. No, all of us are going to do better. It's just there's no way stably for us to get out unless we create the state. And part of the problem is exactly that you don't get to select the outcome. The outcome depends on it's interactive, right? Like it depends on how different people interact. And so everyone's decision goes into settling the outcome. Now, of course, this is 2 people, right? Now, if you add more people to the mix, you get the same dynamic, but it's getting a lot harder to trust people and to negotiate and to coordinate your behavior, right? So got a lot more opportunities for getting stabbed in the back. So.
It does, in a way, it does seem like you can choose the answer, because either way you're agreeing that if you choose to attack or not attack, that them attacking you is bad. You don't want that. So by picking attack, you're saying that, either way, if they pick the choice I least like, I'm still going to end up better off than if I don't attack. So it's like a timeless decision theory, kind of, in a way, like...
It's like you're only choosing between 3 and 4. So
yeah.
It's like if you attack, you assume they're going to attack. If you don't attack, you still assume they're going to attack.
And if they don't, then all...
Well, but if they don't, but not really, right? So that's true. If you assume that they're going to attack, then you should attack because 3 beats 4. But hey, maybe they're crazy, right? Maybe they don't attack. That's possible. You don't know.
Crazy attacking is still
But then, exactly, you're still better because then you get 1 over 2. So, yeah, exactly. It's time saver, right? I don't have to figure out who I'm dealing with.
You're really just choosing between 3 and 4, but you could end up with just 1 or 2 just by chance.
Yeah. Well, if they're stupid enough to not attack, then I mean, if you're stupid to not attack and they're also stupid to not attack, actually you lucked out tremendously, right? But you lucked out, but you could have done much better. Because you could have taken out a person who could be a threat tomorrow. Right? You don't know if he's still in this good a mood tomorrow. Right?
I guess what makes the top 2, and yes, I know that we would love to have 2, and according to Hobbes' argument, the only way you can have two comfortably is by the state. That's the only reason why he even puts two up there, because that goes into his line of argument. He's trying to say that the state of nature you can't get to in a rational way. Only way you can, two rational people can get to is by the state, according to Hobbes. And the biggest difference between the top two outcomes and the bottom two outcomes is the top two outcomes are the only ones where you are controlling yourself. You're the only variable that you can control.
Right.
Whenever you're deciding not to attack, you're depending on someone else to keep you safe. And the thing that makes the top two ones, even though you may not like the outcomes that you're going to have to attack, is because you decide to take control over your life and make yourself on the offensive. It's better to be on the offensive than completely obliterate, because you can either get the second best choice, or you can get the absolute worst choice where you're completely killed, or you can get the top choice and attack them and, oh, I don't have to worry about this person anymore.
Right.
Or you can get the third worst where, yeah, I attacked, but I attacked back. I'd rather go out like a soldier than go out like a buster, is the way I
Michaela?
Yeah, kind of like what you're saying, it seems like he's saying that the whole idea of state of nature is based off of fear and anticipation, which is why you wouldn't choose option number 2, is because he's saying that, you know, it's hardwired in you where you're going to anticipate, and it's smart to anticipate that the other person is naturally going to kill you. And that's based off of fear. And it seems
They might, right? You don't know. Like, they might not. They might. As long as there's just a decent chance that they might. It's really too risky, yeah.
So I feel kind of like he's saying that, you know, having this state is what eliminates that fear.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're hitting the nail on the head. So Hobbes agrees with you. You want to get to 2. The problem is in a state of nature, we can't afford to take the risk. It's too dangerous. Right? And so once we build the state, now we can afford to take the risk because we're protected. Right? We're protected from these aggressors. Yeah, Bill.
But using Hobbes' argument and assuming that all this is true, by deciding to attack, you would guarantee that you'll always get the third best option, which is that you both attack
Yes.
each other.
It's
But
completely stable.
But
Yeah.
by not attacking, to use the example, I think you said of someone breaking into your house, and you don't know if they have a gun or not. Let's just assume that we know as like an omniscient third person. You both have guns. So if you decide to not attack, so you decide to not raise up your arm and point your gun at him, then assuming that he, just like, because we're going with what Hobbes said, he naturally raises up his gun to shoot you, sees that you don't. Now you can get out of it with option number 2 instead of option number 3, right?
Well, it depends, right? So he might think, if you're really in a state of nature, he might think, well, I'm you and I, right? So you don't raise your arm, I'm raising my arm. And I think, wait a minute, maybe he's a good guy, right? And I'm thinking, well, I could go to option number 2. That's pretty good. It's better than option 3. But maybe tomorrow he's grumpy, and so it's even like, let's just get rid of him because maybe he's just trying to
Wouldn't it be more rational?
trying to psych me out, or maybe whatever. Maybe he's like a super fast gunslinger, or I don't know, like, right? Maybe like I said, maybe tomorrow you're angry, or just get rid of you, bang.
But again.
And by the way, probably I'm not even thinking. Probably I'm just so freaked out that I just go and I shoot as fast as I can. I don't have time to do all this reasoning, right? I just think, dangerous person, bang.
But it's about being rational, right? So if you're being rational, you have to give it some amount of thought, right?
Right. Well, good. Yeah, but I'm doing it because I'm rationally like.
And wouldn't it be
I'm
more
most
rational?
concerned with avoiding death, right?
Yeah, exactly,
So-
exactly. You're most concerned with avoiding death,
Right.
not in killing me, but self-defense, anticipation, avoiding your own death. So if I have an inaction of not raising my gun to him, he raises his gun to me, would you not, in self-preservation, think it's more likely that I have friends or family member, I don't know, someone that would then be mad at me or mad at them for killing me, and then come get them? Is that not more likely than I'm some sort of super fast gunslinger? I'm some sort of, or I mean, of course you could always.
Well, so there's several options here, right? So I might think, okay, well, I'd be a nice guy and I can tell my wife home, it's like, hey, honey, look what I did. I didn't kill a person today. It was awesome, right? So that'd be great, right? And I agree, it'd be nice. Hey, maybe we can even trade a little, right? Like you can build some furniture and I'll grow some food. It'll be great. But then there's the problem that I'll never get home, right? Because then, of course, you have a gun there and I have a gun, so I might turn around and say, okay, see you tomorrow, we'll do the trade. You might think twice. You say, well, what did I do? It was so dangerous. Bang, in the back of my head. Right? And so, and I don't know, like right now you're calm, right? But maybe, I don't know, you might be one of those, like, if you have, I have a friend who has this cat. The cat comes up to you, starts like purring, and you pet it, and it loves it, and then suddenly you see in its eye, well, yeah, you see in the eyes like, zzz, and it just goes like, whack! It's like an insane cat. You might be an insane person that way, right? Like, you just be like, nice, 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 zzz, bang! Like, I don't know, and I don't want to die. So I'm sorry, I'm going to kill you.
Well, but now again, using Hobbes, assuming that all of what Hobbes is saying is correct, and you've gotten to that point, it's still in your best interest to not turn around and fire because you just had this situation, and it didn't happen.
Right.
And you would and then you would rationally know, according to Hobbes, that you would be more likely to get option 3 than option 2, and option 2 is better than option 3. So you would still be fine, right? If everything that Hobbes is saying is right, all of his assumptions are right, if you only would need one and not both people to not attack.
So there's a way in which you're completely right here, and there's a sense in which you're not right. And it all depends on the setup of the situation. So if you read Hampton, you'll see Hampton talks about an iterated prisoner's dilemma, which is basically a repeated prisoner's dilemma. And the idea is if we will come across each other, that's why I introduced the thing about possibly trading and stuff, now I'm raising the benefits of us not killing each other. Right? So now not attacking becomes more attractive because if we leave each other alive, there are actually benefits of the other person being alive, given that we're not attacking each other. Right? And so if there's any way we can establish just like a little modicum of trust, right? Very quickly it becomes stable to not attack, right? Because it becomes beneficial. The worry is, can we ever in a state of nature get to that level of trust? Right?
Only because
and so
Hobbes said that we can trust that our first instinct is our own interest. So we know that we're more likely to survive as 2 people because we're stronger that way.
Well, unless the other person kills you, right? That's the problem. Like 2 people means more than 1, and 1 means I don't have to worry about anyone. 2 people means I have to worry about 1 person. Right? Now, if another person shows up, now I have to worry about 2 people. Now, maybe they're nice every day, but I can't. Like, there's always this moment, right?
But you don't need to trust that they're nice because Hobbes said that 1 person will never be strong enough to subdue a bunch, right? So again, you still won't be able to subdue everybody, but as 2 people, you don't need to trust that they're nice. You trust what Hobbes said that you can always trust, which is that everyone's looking out for their own self-interest.
Yeah, but that's my worry. My worry is that you are so obsessed with your self-interest that you'll end up killing me.
But my self-interest is to preserve this friendship because we're stronger together.
No, your self-interest is to try and live.
Which is more likely because I have someone helping me, right?
Well, not unless I change my mind.
But you trust it. But I'm saying that you can trust that they won't change their mind, not because they're nice or a conscience level, but because Hobbes said that we can always trust people look out for their self-interest, and people want to live, and the best way to live is to be strong, and the best way to be strong is to have another person, because you'll never be strong enough to subdue everybody.
Tevin?
I was just going to say that I think you're making the assumption that your personal self-interest would be better off if we were together, but there's no guarantee that that won't change. Like, what if there's only 1 serving of food? And since we're both working from our self-interest, then it might become my best self-interest to kill you for that piece of food. So you can't guarantee that our self-interest will always, depend on, helping each other. Because at some point it might come to the point where one of us has to kill each other to survive. So it kind of blows that up.
Unless we together said, we're stronger than that dude, let's kill him and take his food.
But that's the difference, is assuming that like 2 people are going to be stronger than 1. Because if you both have 1 food source or something, then having 2 will actually be less, that'll be more harmful to the living.
But can't you just keep because now we're 2 people, and everyone else, according to Hobbes, is by themselves. It's a war against all versus all. But now, as 2 people, we can kill and rob you because
but we can't make more food out of this 2. That's what I'm saying.
So here's Hobbes actually talks about this in the Leviathan, right? So Hobbes says the following. He says, yeah, sometimes you'll get like families, they'll trust each other and stuff, and maybe like people grow up or something together, become best friends. You get small groups banding together like that, 2, 3, 4, 5. But there's going to be a point where the group gets bigger, 10, 15, 20, where it's not as tight-knit anymore. We don't know each other as intimately anymore. We might start disagreeing about each other. You think that the right way to divide it is that everyone gets an equal slice of food. Then I say, well, actually, I'm much bigger than you, or it's like whatever, right? It's like, my kid is sick, so I need more food than you. And you say, well, no. And I say, yes, right? And then before you, like maybe one of us gets angry. A third person intervenes. Okay, then the next time, right? So third person intervenes. Now I get angry at that person too. So he says once these groups start getting bigger and a little more anonymous, they start getting really unstable. And so you can get a little small group out, but it's still going to stink. Right? It's still going to stink. And still then you have to worry about what if you run into another group that's just about as smart as you are and about as strong as you are. Same situation, right? One group looks at the other one like, uh-oh. We know we can't be together because it's too big. Right? So now what do? Do we just walk away from each other? Well, if I walk away from them, they might attack us in the back, right? So now the groups are fighting. If the groups are fighting, we are fighting. So he thinks, yes, you can get little pockets of trust going like this, but it won't get you all the way out. It won't get you all the way out because when the group gets too big, it becomes unstable. And you need big groups for life no longer to be nasty, brutish, and short. This is the point that Hampton is making with the iterated dilemma, right? So you're pressing on the right point here. She's saying the simple one-shot deal that we're here discussing, it's too simplistic. And Hobbes actually recognizes that this is not quite what happens. But what does happen is still horrible. And it's still so horrible that the state will be much, much better. Including horrible to the point of like threatening your life. So. All right, thanks. We'll pick this up next time. We got quite a good deal. It's okay.